and welcome to the Venue Success Podcast. I'm your host, Tirzah Caffee, and our theme in season 2 is Tools of the Trade, the pros behind the process. And today I am joined by my sweet friend, Kristen Leen. She's the owner and founder of Event Sales Pro. So hello and welcome to the show, Kristen.
Hi, Tirzah. Thank you so much for having me. I have listened to almost every episode, so I'm excited.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love that. I think you're way ahead of almost everyone in my family. So, yeah. But if you listen to the show, it is time for Crazy Stories with Tirzah because people have lost their mind. So I'm going to give a little parental warning for today. I'm going to be talking about something that might not be great for tiny ears to hear. So if you're listening to this, put your AirPods in or save for later. Okay. That's my warning. Okay, so people ask us all the time, are there any kinds of events that you will not do? And for the most part, we're game for almost anything. We've done all different kinds of events. We've had celebrities. We had Luke Bryan. We've had Married at First Sight at our venue. We've had members of the Trump family come. So I always am very cautious about saying that because I always get very mixed feelings about it. But yet it was a really interesting experience, having something with Secret Service and, they really love coming to our venue because it's gated and it was that, anyway, nonetheless. We've done all kinds of different things. And there is one type of event that we did one time and we will never do it again. And that is hosting a frat party. And of course they don't say that it's a frat party, right? I didn't realize they sold it as some some ball or whatever. I don't know. It was most definitely a frat party. And I happened to not be in town when this was happening. Another really big problem. And so I get a phone call. I was getting text messages throughout the night, oh my gosh, here's that this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. And I'm like, okay, make sure you're IDing everybody at the bar and blah, 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 blah. But there's no way that you could really control that. People are just going to get alcohol and give it to their friend, right? It was just bonkers. And so at some point, one of my banquet managers goes into the ladies' bathroom, and there's 2 people in there, naked as Jaybird, bent over the sink, going at it.
No.
They were in full swing. And so she calls me, and she's like, oh my gosh, Tirzah, there's someone having sex in the bathroom. And I'm like, what did you do? Did you stop them? And she goes, no, I left. I figured they should finish.
I mean,
What I would have done in that situation. It's so awkward. You just see it and you're like, ah. Anyway, so, and then the night just kept progressively getting worse. People were peeing in our bushes. We found people out behind the bushes having sex. It was the most disgusting event by far we had ever hosted. And I'm sorry to say I wasn't there actually. I don't know. What would you have done, honestly, if you walked in on someone full out having sex in the bathroom? I feel like this version of myself would have just died laughing. I don't know. Maybe I would have gotten grossed out and walked out like she did. I don't know. And it's funny because she's in her mid upper 50s. And so it was just funny. I thought I should let him finish.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Anyway, so it was one of the things that led me to want to close down our bed and breakfast actually too, because I'm these parties, alcohol, I get it. They're having fun. They're out on a date, whatever. But it's I wanted to remove all beds from our property because I feel like if anyone knew that there's even a couch, I'm very limited in the couches.
That totally makes sense. Now you go to some venues that are completely empty and they figured this out. Just
right?
don't have any furniture.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, we used to have, I think we had our honeymoon suite, which was like also our bridal suite. So they got married, they got ready in there, and then they would stay the night. And also, that was always like rock, paper, scissors. Who's going to have to clean that room the next day? Like, it was one of the better decisions I ever made to remove
Hmm.
all of our accommodations. However, I know that is quite the trend to have venues with accommodations, but
Yeah.
not for me. Anyway, that's our nasty story for today. And people think that owning a wedding venue is so glamorous. It's
Hmm.
like these are the things you can never be prepared for
Right.
sure. So, anyway, there you have it. Crazy stories with Tirzah. All right. So, Kristen, tell us
Yes.
about yourself. Tell us about Event Sales Pro. Fill us in on who you are, what you do, and then we have a really great session for you guys today. So I'm super excited about it. So spill the tea.
Yeah. All right. I am Kristen Leen, and like Tirzah said, I own Event Sales Pro. I started venue consulting several years ago while I was still working at a venue in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I have experience running and managing venues, not owning a venue. I always like to make that really clear. I never want to own a venue, probably because of those stories that you have, which as the venue director, I have those same stories. Typically, the owners I worked for were rarely on site. So, I still have very similar experiences, but yeah, for all those reasons and more, I don't want to own a venue, but I love helping venue owners reach their financial potential and just really enjoy the venue that they have by creating systems. And I really focus on the sales side of that. So when venues reach out to me, I'm working on sales funnel problems from inquiry to booking. I definitely can consult on other things, but typically that is my niche. That is where I have my zone of genius and I can serve people best. I did corporate sales for many, many years, over a decade before entering the wedding industry. So I really consider myself a salesperson who fell in love with the wedding industry and applied everything I knew from there to the wedding industry, which really for venues in particular, they don't have a ton of systems and organization around the sales process. So I love helping create that so it's less scattered and more productive. So I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I help venues across the country. I think I've done over 23 states, somewhere around there. And then I have a venue in Canada, in Toronto, in the UK, and in Melbourne, Australia. So I've done some international venues as well. And what I found is that we all have the same problem, which is, we really need better conversions from inquiry to tour and tour to booking. And some venues do have their own secret sauce. It doesn't always work the same way at other venues. So I work a lot with venues that are expanding into additional properties. And most of the venues that I work with are food and beverage in-house. So I
Mm-hmm.
specifically help because that's my experience. The venues I ran, we had in-house chefs, in-house culinary programs. So many times these properties have restaurants or resort style amenities on site. So they do have, potentially the lodging. Almost all of them have a restaurant. Sometimes that's a fine dining and a fast casual restaurant. Or sometimes they've built up their wedding venue revenue enough where it's strictly catering events. So, and I tend to help venues that are a little bit more, I would say, in the mid to upper mid market. So not quite luxury, not quite the lower market. That tends to be where this particular venue model I think is very successful. So yeah, everybody's different. And I have two sides of my business where I will one-on-one consult with them. I'll fly out there. I'm going to Dallas this week, where I'll fly out there. I'll train the venue team, the sales team, how to give excellent tours, how to set up their tours for success, how to close. And then on the other side of my business, which is growing very rapidly because of what's going on in the industry, which we can get to, that's the virtual sales team. So that's where I actually have lead managers running the system for them. So the system we put in place, all the tech stack is put in place for the venue. And then we run inquiries to tours. We book the tours, answer every inquiry super fast, book those tours, and then we follow up to send out the proposals and help close the contract. So really the venue's just focused on giving great tours, which they're usually pretty good at, especially after I come visit and we kind of get some systems in place, and then executing great events. So yeah, so that is
I
my
love
business.
it. I love it. We share so much passion, specifically around this sales conversation because
Mhm.
I know I see so many venues and they will easily pour tens of thousands of dollars into these big label marketing companies. We shall not mention them, but there's lots of them. It's not just those two. There's many
Yeah.
others, right? And they will happily spend tens of thousands of dollars on their marketing. And the thing that I think is so you know, I don't know. I just feel like this is a big bottleneck for people is that they spend all that money, they get the leads coming in,
Mhm.
however they get the leads in, they're willing to spend the marketing money to get them in. And then they botch it. And I'm like, and it's just like you've got, like, and your conversion rate is crazy low. And it's like the people that are maybe
Mhm.
doing the tours should not be the ones doing the tours. Like there's just
Mhm.
so much that happens at this point that I will just pause and say, like, there's more of you than what Kristen and I can even help. Let me
Mhm.
tell you, because dare I say, every single one of you listening to this might benefit from having a sales audit, having someone come in,
Yeah.
give you some feedback. I was just with a venue in California a few weeks ago, and they're fantastic. Like they do wonderful tours, but their close was really had a lot to be desired. And I just, sometimes just those little tweaks of that outside perspective can change everything. And so
Yeah.
I am a big advocate of having someone come in to analyze your sales process and even train you. Because a lot of people in the wedding industry, venues specifically, we kind of happen into it, and it's like we're not trained in sales. We don't have a marketing background. Like, and there's really a skill set that can be taught, right? That most people don't naturally have.
Mhm.
They just don't. And
Mhm.
so, but it can be taught. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you're terrible at sales, like this is going to be, there's so much more that we won't be able to talk about today. Be sure and get
Yeah.
a coach. So, with that, let's talk a little bit about the state of the industry right now. You and I are in all the same Facebook groups and we roll our eyes at all the same things and silently, of course, but everyone has the same complaint. And that is like, what's going on with my sales right
Mhm.
now? Like, things are so low. They feel like things are slow. Talk to me about what you feel like is going on.
Yeah, and it's crazy because even in our inboxes, like this week, there's tons of podcasts specifically being, this topic being discussed, like the whole podcast, or articles that we're getting, from lots of different publications about like how difficult 2025 is. And of course, I was ringing this bell last year because it's not a 2025 problem. It's really a 2024 problem, I think. And I think it's lingering into this year, and it could potentially linger into next year. But we venue owners, especially new venue owners, are always surprised at the runway of the sales cycle that it
Yep.
takes, to build up. When I start with a new venue, it's like maybe they're newly opened, and like it's probably going to take 18 months to 2 years to really get, the sales cycle all the way through, because couples do book sometimes, within the year, but typically it is a year or more, out. Although this year we're seeing kind of the opposite. So every year is different. I can say that, there's nothing predictable about the last 5 or 6 years. The golden years, the heyday was kind of in the teens, the 20 teens. But after COVID, everything's been so up and down. So I think, last year was really the peak of the engagement gap. We know that's kind of a real thing
Mm-hmm.
statistically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we'll ever truly know how COVID directly impacted engagements, because relationships are so unique. And we did see people doing all kinds of things, still getting married in different ways. But as far as like the traditional venue cycle, we need about 18 months to see the impacts of today and what that's going to happen. So I think we're experiencing a 2024 problem of an election year,
Yep.
of inflation, of the boom and the bust of just what happened with all the COVID weddings that were being rescheduled for some of the states that didn't open until 2022. Or, my clients in California, I mean, they were really coming out of it in 2023, and so there's a lot to be said when you kind of look at the country as a whole, and it's very different for everybody. And I think that's where we're getting this mixed bag of some venues being like, oh, it's a great year. It also depends on when that venue opened. We saw a big, explosion
my gosh,
venues
yeah.
opening.
Yes.
I know you know this. In 2020, it was like the real estate market. Like everybody thought they could open a venue. In 2020, everybody thought they could be a real estate agent. Um, and so, of course, we could dig into more of that. But because of that, some venues, typically in their first few years, they either do really, really great, or they kind of start with the boom, or it's kind of a really slow, long, grueling haul to get started. And that really depends on their marketing experience. If they're pre-launching, maybe they're working with a
Yep.
coach like yourself
Yep.
to get
Yep.
launched. I don't work with venues who are brand new, who are still in the stage of like opening, but I refer them to people like you and a couple others that
Kristen
will do
Benford.
that. And
Yes. Go to Kristen Benford.
yes, Kristen
She's great at
Benford.
that.
Yeah, she has I can't remember the name of the program, but it's basically for people who are interested in getting
Yes.
started and knowing what it's
Yes.
going to take to market and sell the venue even before you launch. So
Exactly.
that's really critical, right? But a lot of people don't do that. And so there's just this huge volatility in the market. And as far as like couples, let's talk about, what couples behavior is. So they inquire very differently. And I've been researching a lot about this, about buying behaviors of Gen Z versus millennials. And we're on the cusp of Gen Z and millennials being around the average buying age. So the Knot just came out with their big like vendor profile of the year, and it was 32. It was the age. So that's kind of right. Gen Z is, I believe it's 18 to 28 right now, somewhere around there. So they're starting to come into the market, right? If half are below 32, half are above, they're really starting to come to the market. They buy differently. Here's what they do, right? They inquire a lot. They're information hoarders. They're digital natives. They've always been able to look up anything on the internet. So they do. And they inquire a lot more. Millennials are the me generations. I'm a millennial, and we're going to go find what we like, and we're going to do what we want, and we're going to pick, the thing that works for us because it's kind of about me. And obviously that's overgeneralizing a whole generation, but that's kind of what they're known for, right? And this new generation, they very much make decisions in a triangle. They very much go do the research. Then they share that research with their trusted friends and family. And then based on those two things, they complete the triangle and make their decision. And so I think that's really, really interesting that they take a longer time to buy because they have to do those two pieces before they can complete the buying decision. And, it used to be when we were giving tours that we give the tour, and then at the end of it, I mean, we could pretty much close the couple, either right there on the tour or within 24 hours. And now it's the excuses or the pushback, I would say, is, we got to go see more venues, and we've always gotten that, but it was usually like they were seeing 3 to 5 venues, not 10 to 12. So we're seeing that number go up. They're seeing more venues. There's also more on the market for them to see in most markets. So there's that. They also want to go on second tours, or they want to bring a lot of people on the tour, which can create an inefficient tour experience, and they want to send the quotes off to other people. We need to hop back on a call to figure this out. If you don't have a sales system in place, or if you're not, from the sales world where you understand how to shift your sales process to the buyer's cycle, it's going to be really hard for you to keep up with that. So I hear a lot of venue owners being like frustrated because we used to give the tour and then they would just book, or they wouldn't, and they would go away. And that was still okay for them because they were hitting their numbers, because they had enough people coming into tour that liked it and could make a quick decision. And now people are taking a week, a month, to even let us know, hey, I'm still interested or whatever. So I think that is really difficult when you already have a long buying cycle, and it's just extending the pain point that we're all feeling, right? And so it's still possible to improve your sales skills to overcome that. And that's, to your point, that you can learn certain strategies, but you also have to adapt. You also have to adapt to the new buying market and say, like, okay, we're entering, we're selling to somebody new. I always say, like, we get older who've been in the industry for a long time, but they stay roughly the same age, right? And there's a new generation coming up. And so we have to learn to adapt to the way that they buy.
It's so good. So good. That was, yeah, applause, applause. That was so, so good. And I resonate and agree with everything that you're saying. I think one little thing that I would add in there is that this generation, they are consuming information at just such a high speed.
Mm,
And there was a time in which I could sit down and put 6-page detailed, because my venue is all inclusive. Here's everything, full
mm,
disclosure. You do that to this generation and they are completely overwhelmed. Like
mhm.
now this generation, they will they will clam up if they get overwhelmed, and they will shut down. And so I've seen the resurrection of the moms, where I didn't see that for a hot second.
Yeah,
And the
moms are back. Yeah.
moms are back. Oh, we love the moms. But
Yeah.
I hear this a lot in groups where like, I'm doing the same thing I've always done and I was successful before. And I'm like, listen to
Mhm.
me, Linda. It's like, you have to change. Like,
Yeah.
you can't just think that you get to stay stagnant and that the way that you were once successful will allow you to continue to be. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's not how it is. And so I call them baby bears. I've talked about this in the podcast before. It's just
Mhm.
like people are timid. They are afraid also of the sales process. Like
Yeah.
they're like afraid that you're going to actually ask them to buy, God forbid,
Mhm.
that you get to the closing point and they kind of freak.
Yeah.
And so there it is, I think, fun challenge right now. Like, to me,
Mhm.
like, I love trying a new sales tactic.
Yeah.
But I think for the average bear, like, this is very scary for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, we could talk for 45 minutes about this, but let's move on to the next
Yeah.
category. What are some of the differences in the sales funnel for wedding venues that are full service versus the venue only properties?
Mm.
Because I'm seeing, I don't know if I want to call it a trend, but I'm seeing definitely an increase in people that understand that this generation needs packages, because they're looking for, again, they're baby bears. They can't handle a lot. Like, they really literally cannot handle planning their own wedding. And
Mhm.
so the packages make sense to them. They see the value in that. And then we have those venue only properties, right? So what are 2 or 3 like differences that you see in the sales funnel for those different?
Yeah. So when I started consulting in 2021, I noticed that there was a pretty clear difference when I was talking to venue owners, um, with what their goals were, financial goals for venues with a venue only model, a rental fee only. Maybe there were some accessory services, adding a photo booth, or maybe they got a kickback on linens or certain things like that, versus full service venues that have additional revenue streams of food, that bar, maybe just the bar, lodging. Typically, they have a lot more overhead, so they need to make more revenue, but there's also more profit, to be found in there as well, and for a lot of them. And then some of the smaller venue only properties, they were realizing very quickly, especially very different if they have a mortgage versus not having a mortgage, of course. But if they were trying to hit that like 60 plus wedding range, they were having to build out a team, and then they were finding like, oh, I'm not making enough money to like actually pay my team to do this. So you have to run really lean and mean, when you're a venue only property, unless you don't have a mortgage. And there's plenty of venue owners that don't for various reasons. But you really do. And so, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that business model. Um, the sales cycle is different for them because they're really selling, um, a lower cost, item overall, quoting somebody $8,000 for the venue versus a venue that's also 8,000, but you're quoting them 40,000 because it includes food, beverage, planning, whatever. I mean, you're the queen of this. You have the all inclusives. It's a very different sales process, I would say it still is, they inquire, they get your information, you're engaging with the lead in digital communication. You're trying to get them to come into the tour. So the big steps are still the same, right? But the information that they need and the trust that they have to build in you to write a $40,000 check versus an $8,000 check is very different. Yeah, so you have to have a professional sales team. And that's not to like discount anybody who's selling venue only properties. I did work at one property where I just sold the venue. I was always quite frustrated at that because I could feel the frustration of my clients. Like they were like, I can't do this. Like now I have to go do the whole thing over again with a caterer and the whole thing over again with all these other people. So I was like constantly working to like build those relationships with vendors and say, just call April. She's the best caterer around, or call this person just to kind of ease their hesitation of buying. And I will say that I see that with some of the venue only clients that I have had. They're like, hey, now this new generation, they're asking us for like, what's your all inclusive package? And I was like, I don't have one, or okay, well, who's your caterer? Well, I don't have one. So they're trying to make these like relationships with the caterer where then they can get like out of a kickback if it's the only caterer. A lot of times that falls apart because if you don't have a catering background, do not get into catering. Like that is not typically something I would recommend. The bar is easy. I have a bar course that I sell. A lot of people love it because the bar has a low barrier of entry. It's fairly easy. The licensing, the permitting is the biggest hurdle. Once you get past that, it's very easy to run and maintain. But food is like a whole different story, So anyways, I think that you have to have a very professional sales system that builds that trust from the very start. Right? It's not like, oh, come in and we'll talk to you and we might have a menu to show you. It's like, no, can you customize this? I'm a vegan, I'm gluten-free. Like, well, we don't need to talk about that because we're just talking about the venue right now. No, they want to talk about it. They do.
Yeah.
They want to understand like food is important to this generation. Well, a lot of them are self-described foodies. A lot of them have dietary restrictions, be it elective or true allergies. And regardless of that, we have to adapt and give them that experience that they want. A lot of international clients are coming in to various markets and having these huge, needs for international cuisine. How does your chef adapt to that? Or do you have a policy where you allow outside catering? Those are all a lot more deeper questions that have to be answered and very confidently answered when you're presenting a 30, 40, 50 plus $1,000 quote in front of people. I think that that's where I really come in and try to help people is smoothing out their sales funnel from the website to the, emails, to the brochure, to the follow-up, to the presentation of a quote, to really giving the tour experience where we're sitting down and we're going through that proposal versus a venue only property. There's not a whole lot to present to them at the end of the tour other than maybe some policies, procedures, and here's the dates we have available. And this is the package, right?
Exactly.
So it's a different consultative process for sure.
And I think one of the most challenging parts of all of that is that you're trying to build trust with them. And if you can build a connection and build trust with them, you've almost always are going to get that sale because they want that. They actually do. Like this generation is longing for authenticity. They want to feel good about the decision that they're making. And so you have to be willing to take the time to massage that because that is not just something that you can do necessarily. It's tricky to do through technology, through email. That is hard. If you could get them, even Zoom is going to be better than an email. If you could build connection with them. And I do think a good, well done sales funnel, even if it is just digital communication, can do that. But they can read right through if something feels canned and fake, And so I think that's something that you do really well is like creating that connection. That's what it's all truly. So much of this is about that, especially when you're trying to get them to cut a very, very big check. And their dad's K is like tanking right now. And so it's pretty crazy. But so let's talk about the sales funnel. We talked about how the market is kind of struggling right now. Like, what do you think some of the biggest challenges that people are facing inside that funnel? They're wanting to increase their bookings. Like, what is it that they can do?
So it's really, sales is really just a numbers game. And I want to say that while I want you to hold two thoughts at the same time that like, yes, we have an emotional buyer and an emotional purchase, and we have to build that trust in them through, authenticity, clarity, a very clear offer, pricing clarity as well, policies, procedures, all of that. That's part of it. But and then that's your forward facing, client conversation. The back end of thinking, putting your business hat on and thinking of your sales funnel is it's a numbers game. Okay. So, I always like to use 100 weddings. I know not every venue wants or needs 100 weddings, but let's just use that for an example. If you want 100 weddings a year, how do you get there, right? For most of the venues that I work with, we want to get about 100 leads a month. And we want to convert about 20% of those leads into tours. So we're going to be giving 20 quality tours a month. And how do we give a quality tour? How do we pre-qualify them? I mean, it's not necessarily your salesperson asking them to fill out a 20 question form. Your marketing, your Instagram, your website, your brochure materials, all of that, your emails, all of that should be doing the really heavy lift of clients being able to say, this is what I'm looking for, right? And I have a pretty good hunch that I need to spend some more time with these people, figure out if they're my people. So, and a lot of venues are terrible at this, right? I look at the websites and it's just like 4 bullet points, 12-hour rental, tables and chairs. And it's like, there's got to be more to that story, And so once we get 100 leads in, we're converting because the front of the sale, the very top of the sales funnel is working, right? Your ads are working, your website, your social media, and we're converting 20% of those to tours. We're getting 20 quality tours. And then I want you to get about 40 to 50% minimum conversion ratio on those tours. So then you should be right around, 100 a year. Of course, there are months where there's busy. You might have 17 contracts, in January or February. You might kind of dip down at this time of the year in the spring, and so forth and so on. But that should be kind of the average. And if there's a broken piece of your funnel, we need to really dig into that, and that is where, when I interview a sales team, usually, especially when I go on site, but I can do it virtually as well. I'll kind of isolate, let's have a chat. Like what is challenging with your job? And they'll explain to me, I'm just not a salesperson, or gosh, I give all these tours and I feel like I'm great at giving tours, but then I can't close. People often don't know the leak in their funnel. They can't see it because they don't have data. They're not looking at numbers. They're looking at it emotionally. It's a lot of, I feel like I give great tours. Feel like we have a lot of inquiries coming in. I feel like, I send out a lot of contracts. And I just take that emotion out of it and I really look at the data. And if it's not at that 20%, why? And not every venue can get to that. A lot of venues get too many leads. They're getting hundreds of leads. I had a venue recently getting like 400 leads a month. You would have to hire a team of people to manage that many leads. And it was really a website problem, right? Because her website didn't get enough information. It's a stunning venue. Everyone would want to get married there. So they all inquire, and there's just not pricing clarity and so forth and so on. So we actually did the opposite. We wanted to take her down, and now she's getting 80 to 100 leads a month. And that's perfect. That's giving her funnel exactly what it needs, more qualified leads to have quality conversations with. And people go too fast. They want to shove the tour. They want to shove the discovery call or whatever in front of people before asking some very basic questions. So I'm oftentimes training on how to digitally communicate through question-based selling, because they want to say, we offer this and we have this date available and this is the price, instead of saying like, when are you looking to get married? What do you like about, I'm a summer bride. Okay. What do you like about summer? Well, I'm a teacher because, we have time off during that time. And we don't like the cold, and that's when our whole family takes vacation, the month of July. And I know everybody won't be stressed out about, helping me with my wedding during that time. Wow. I just learned a lot from asking 2 questions versus just saying, hey, July 12th is available. Do you want it? Do you want to book a tour?
Right.
It's a
No,
very different.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's simple, but I can't, it's hard. I can't sometimes get some salespeople or some of the sales team members to understand how critical those questions are and how critical it is to stay curious, because they're exhausted of answering 400 leads,
Right.
a
Right.
month. So let's narrow it down. Let's perfect the top of the funnel. Make sure, the social media, the website, the brochures, the stuff that they're first initially seeing is clear, concise, informative, before they get into that part of the funnel where you do need to give more to get qualified tours that are then converting.
I think it's so good. And I like what you said about, because, and it depends. You cannot compare everyone with this whole
Mm-hmm.
like lead inquiry thing, because if you have a place that is wanting to, do 120 to 150 like my
Hmm.
venue, you need to have a bigger
Yeah.
funnel to
Yeah. Yeah.
choose from, right? So, but most people are sitting in that 50 to 75 range. I
Yeah.
would say like most venues are going to probably, especially the newer ones, are going to be super happy if they get 50 a year.
Right.
But I like what you said, and I'll just kind of reiterate this, that if you are getting 20% of your inquiries to actually fill out a contact form, come in for a tour. If you are having only 25% of your people that come into tour convert, there is definitely red flag, red flag. Like there's something broken on your side that you need to repair. A lot of people brag about their high conversion rate, and I don't always like to get too stuck on this. I think it's good information. I think it's just it's one of the pieces of the puzzle. It's good information. But if someone is going to be like, hey, I'm closing 80%, I'm also kind of like, there might be some issues with that too, because it's like, is your price too low? You know what I mean? Are you competitive in your market? I like there to be a little bit of resistance.
Yeah.
This maybe is like maybe a high level sales conversation,
Hmm.
but there is a real psychology into, I like that 50, 60% conversion rate. I
Yeah.
feel
Me
good
too.
about that. 80% actually causes me almost as much worry as the 20% because I'm like,
Yeah.
there's whole other reasons why, and maybe that we'll
Yeah.
save that for another
Yeah.
time. But again, let this be information for you. I think another thing that I would say is that venues aren't good. You saw me post this in a Facebook group recently where they were like, oh, I'm down right now. And what I was like, are you tracking it? Do you have
Yeah.
historical data? Do you remember? I think it
I
was you
don't.
and me. Do you have historical data to be like, hey, guess what? Every
Yeah.
year and like this time, the parents are losing their mind. They're
Yeah.
like in that final crunch of, school or whatever happens at this
Yeah.
time of year. It's always kind of a bit crazy. There's people that are in finals. Like I am the age now of a mom that has a kid that could be getting married. And it's
Yeah.
like, I know the psychology of my daughter right now. And she's
Hmm.
completely stressed out. Like planning a wedding would be the last thing on her mind. She
Yeah.
just wants
Yeah.
to pass physics and anatomy, right? And so you just have to see the ebb and flow. And
Hmm.
so year to year, it's different, but also month to month is different.
Hmm.
There's two big peaks that I have seen for 12 years. January, we all
Hmm.
understand that. But the other one is July. And
Hmm.
it's like
Yeah.
that secret thing that no one talks about.
Yeah.
July is almost exact data to January for us.
Yeah.
So
And that could be different depending on where your venue is
depending.
located.
Absolute.
Hmm.
It doesn't really matter. Don't take that. It's your data. My
Yeah.
data doesn't
Hmm.
matter. It's
Yeah.
your data. Anyway, that was a rabbit trail, but also I just
Yeah. I mean,
soapbox
I have
very
a venue
important.
that is, that we do virtual sales for in South Carolina. And they're a rustic lodge and they have, the menu is very like heavy, rich food. They're not going to get a lot of people that want to get married in the summer months, for that. And they're also near a lake and they're not too far from the beach and the mountains and all the stuff that is great about South Carolina. And so it's just dead. It's just completely dead for like 2 or 3 months. And they just expect that and they plan for that. Yeah. So all this is important, right? To really know your data. And if if anyone were to call me and we do a discovery call, that's the first thing I ask. I have you fill out a form before we get on the call. And I would say, or I try to, because most people are just like, Kristen, like, we can't even find this data. Like, it would take us like a week or two to find this data. Can we just get on the call? And we get on the call and immediately I'm like, well, just give me a ballpark, right? And the numbers they say, I'll write them down. And then later, once we're doing the audit, I'll actually get the data and it's wildly different. Like their memories are not accurate. And we know this, right? It's like very hard for us to remember numbers in general. And so I think that is really important. It takes the emotion out of it, especially if you're a venue owner who has a sales team. You're thinking of moving people around, like maybe, hey, this person is actually, we think might be better at sales and this person might be better at event management. And so let us switch the roles around instead of firing or rehiring or whatever. And so I've been through that process a lot. And it's interesting. It's like that can be a very emotional decision, for your team. And let's just look at the numbers. Let's just try it. Let's just see Is this person better at tours just kind of naturally because they can warm up to people really quickly? They can understand the quotes a little bit easier, and they're a numbers person. They can kind of spit things out. There are certain things that you have to be good at when you're giving a tour. You have to be able to make people feel comfortable. And I can't really teach that. I have gone on tour trainings with people where they're just extremely awkward, and you can tell that, like, I'm awkward, they're definitely awkward, and the client feels awkward. And so that's not the person that you want. Maybe they're
Exactly.
great at other parts of the business, and you want to keep them, but you have to instantly get somebody to trust you, like you, and be like, okay, I want to continue this conversation. So I think that that's important, making sure the person is in the right seat. So it's either, right person, wrong seat, or wrong person, right seat. You have to kind of figure that out. I know for most salespeople, they start off with just a great personality, and then they learn the skills. So I think those can be taught, those can be perfected. You can perfect your craft, but it takes time.
Yeah, and you can't ask someone to change their personality. And I think
No.
that's the tricky thing, right? Like you can hone some skills and, but
Yeah.
if someone has, and I think personality is a huge part of having that right front facing person. And, I say this a lot to these venue owners that are a little bit older and maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more stubborn, and they're not good at making that personal connection. Listen,
Mm-hmm.
like, you're costing yourself so much money. Sometimes you got to open up your purse a little and dig a little deeper to put the right person in place to have that long-term financial success too. Like, you might not feel that you could
Yeah.
afford it right now, but can you afford not to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I literally, again, looking at the data, and I call it a sales tracker, where I create the spreadsheet of, like, who gives the tours, what's their conversion rates, all of this. I had a husband and wife team, and we found out, that the wife was giving all the tours. And when the husband gave the tours, he actually was better at closing them. And it got even better when they were both on the tour. So, we did that ABC, testing of saying, like, well, who's better? So now, but she's better at doing the final detail meetings, and, getting all the things into the CRM. So you have to figure out who serves, the sales process best, because you're not going to have a wedding to plan if you don't have the right person in the sales seat. So I think that's why it's so critical to really kind of dig in, analyze your system, and then also that person and how they're doing, and that's what the owners struggle with. They're like, Kristen, how do I even look at this when I'm not a salesperson? When I don't know what's going on, and 2025 feels really scary. How do I look at this and say, like, what is this person doing right? Where could they improve? And I get the calls. I got a call this past week where it's like, hey, we're letting this person go, and we don't even know what we're going to do, but it's just got to be better than this, And so I feel for them. And I think that the venues who are going to rise to the top in a down market are going to be the ones who say, hey, we're going to figure this sales thing out. And I'm not a salesperson, or I don't like sales, but I like keeping my venue open and being successful and paying my staff and not being stressed out. So I got to figure this piece of the puzzle out.
It's so good. It's so good. Listen, we could talk for hours and hours. There's so much more here. And I love talking to you, like, just about this sales process in general, because you go to all of these, like, conventions, and, you go, people talk a lot about sales, like, in general, but I just feel like the venue sale process is just, there are some fundamental, across the board truths about sales, right? Building rapport and trust and all of that stuff. That's fundamental. But, like, the venue, we are like the first one in the process too. And so we're getting all of the knee jerk reactions and shock and awe about,
Yeah.
wait, a wedding costs what? And so
Yeah.
we get to be on the front end of that. And so I think I really feel like the venue is the hardest thing to sell, because also it is, for the most part, you and I work with a lot of people that do food and beverage, and it's like it is a higher ticket item, and we're having to explain to them, hey, like, this is what each of these things are, this is the benefits to doing this. And so again, because it is at the beginning, it is a harder sale, you have to be so much better at your craft, you know? So, you know, this isn't all some like big sales thing to be like, oh, hire Kristen and Tirzah. This is not it at all. Cause honestly, don't like, we can't handle you all. But I'm just saying, educate yourself, get
Yeah,
books, like,
totally.
stay in not just the old sales books that have been around forever. Like, really, Kristen and I, like, we're always learning about what is happening with this generation. You know, I say this all the time, if you're not growing, you're dying. You have to always be looking ahead. And I know it's hard and we're tired and we're venue
Yeah.
owners, which means like, you know, we haven't had a day off in forever. We're maybe a little bit burnout, but that's a topic for another time. This
Yeah.
was great. Do you have any, we're at the end of our time, but do you have any closing thoughts for the amazing venue owners that are listening today?
Yeah, just invest in yourself, invest in your team, to get them some of that education, be it like going to Wedding MBA, which we're both going to be there in November. That's actually where I started really learning so much many years ago, attending before, of course, I started my business. And just reaching out, even if it's just a discovery call. I give so much on my discovery calls just because I want to help. Like, even if I can solve a little problem, but maybe it's not a good fit for us to work together. I think that, you have to have some internal motivation to get better, at any part of your trade. And sales is not something typically people can just like, pick up and read one book and go with it. I think that it does take practice and consistency. And I see this a lot too, where I'll give the teams, the playbook and they put it in place. And then I come back 3 months later and they drop the ball, and it's like, you still have to do the reps. You have to, just like you're going into the gym every day, you go in there, you look at all the parts of your sales funnel and you do it. And so if you're not going to be dedicated to doing that, or you don't have a team member who's dedicated to doing that, that's where maybe you go look for that person, or you start to hire specifically for that piece of the puzzle. Because if your current team is not going to do it, and that's what's needed to continue your growth, then yeah, that's going to be your next move, is to hire that person who's willing and excited to do that.
So well said. So well said. This was a really great conversation today. I really appreciate you, Kristen. I know
Yeah,
that
thanks
you
for
are
having me.
serving like so many people in such incredible ways. And I think it's one of the things that I love about the venue coaches that are out there. Like, we're all friends with each other. Like, we support each other, and we're like, hey, listen, like, I can't work with it. I don't have capacity for this person, or like, your expertise is going to be better to serve them. And I think that's something that's really awesome about, Benford and you and me. And it's like, we all have our own niches, and we all like fundamentally just want the venue space to grow and improve, and that we want people to be successful. I talk a lot about like I love seeing venues that could build something to the point where they can have generational wealth. I mean, I just
Mhm.
sold my venue
Yeah.
22 days ago, and it's just like,
Yeah.
that was a hard but also really good step in my journey to be able to do other things. And a lot of us, yeah, it's just there's so much more about this venue journey, just because so much of us have a lot more skin in the game. Like, you had mentioned that too. Like, we've got the biggest mortgages out there.
Yeah.
A lot of us. And there's those lucky ones that have legacy farms that, that have just been passed down for generations and they don't have a mortgage. I do feel a little jealous of those people.
Yeah.
But there's so much to be learned and so much to be had in this venue space. I really do think that that's one of the passions that Kristen and I have too. It's like, we love seeing people make money. Like, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like, there's nothing that
Yeah.
gets me like more excited than like, I had
Yeah.
a client call me, one of my California ones, and he's like, Tirzah, we had just created a weekend package. And
Mhm.
he's just like, I just sold a $57,000 weekend
Yeah.
package, and
Yeah.
they've only been open 18 months.
Wow.
I mean, he's like, I knew I had to call you. I knew you'd be super stoked about that.
Yeah.
And we want you to be able to make the most for
Mhm.
that you can
Mhm.
with these places and not drop the ball, getting all the leads in and then not know what to do with them. So reach
Yeah.
out to Kristin. We're going to
Yeah.
put all of your information in the show
Sure.
notes. Definitely, if you are at that point where you're needing some help in the sales cycle, definitely reach out to her. So thank you for being on today, Kristin. And for my viewers and listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time on the Venue Success Podcast. Talk to you later.